Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. With your permission, I will make a statement on the Government's White Paper on restoring control over the immigration system. 5 months ago, the figures were published that showed net migration had reached a record high of more than 900,000 under the last Conservative government, a figure that had quadrupled in the space of just 4 years. It was the consequence of specific government choices made from 2020 onwards, including introducing what was effectively a free market experiment on immigration, encouraging employers to recruit from abroad, loosening controls in different areas but without any requirement to tackle skills and labour shortages here at home. Choices which undermined the immigration system and the economy too. This government is making very different choices. We made clear at the time, just as we had set out in our manifesto, this government would restore order and control to the immigration system, bringing net migration substantially down, but also boosting skills and training here at home. The White Paper we are publishing today does exactly that, and it is built on 5 core principles. First, that net migration must come down so the system is properly managed and controlled. Second, that the immigration system must be linked to skills and training here in the UK so that no industry is allowed to rely solely on immigration to fill its skills shortages. Third, the system must be fair and effective with clearer rules in areas like respect for family life to prevent perverse outcomes that undermine public confidence. Fourth, that the rules must be respected and enforced, including tackling illegal and irregular migration and deporting foreign criminals. And finally, that the system must support integration and community cohesion, including new rules on the ability to speak English and the contribution that people can bring to the UK. Our United Kingdom is an interconnected and outward-looking nation. Our history and our geography mean that for generations, British people have travelled overseas to live and work, and people have come to the UK to study, work, invest or seek refuge. And British citizens draw on heritage from all over the world, and that has made us the country we are today. Through many years, our country has been strengthened by those who've come here to contribute, from doctors in our NHS, entrepreneurs founding some of our biggest businesses, to those who came through generations to work in jobs from coal mining to caring for our loved ones to serving in our armed forces. People often coming to do some of the most difficult jobs of all. And our trading nation, global leading universities and strong historic international connections mean migration will always be part of our country's future as well as our past. But that is exactly why immigration needs to be properly controlled and managed. And it hasn't been. Overseas recruitment shot up, while training in the UK was cut. Lower skilled migration soared while the proportion of UK residents in work plummeted. In 2019, 10% of skilled work visas went to non-graduate jobs. By 2024, that had risen to 60%. Employers were even given a 20% wage discount if they recruited for shortage jobs from abroad, actively discouraging them from paying the going rate or training here at home. Education institutions were allowed to substantially expand the number of overseas students without proper compliance checks. Social care providers were encouraged to recruit from abroad with no proper regulation. So we saw a serious increase in exploitation, deeply damaging for those who came to work here in good faith and also for other workers and responsible companies who were being undercut. The rules and laws that are supposed to underpin the immigration system were too often ignored, and by 2024, returns of people with no right to be in the UK were down over a third compared to 2010. And of course, criminal gangs were allowed to build an entire smuggling industry along our borders, undermining security and creating a crisis in the asylum system. Madam Deputy Speaker, later this year we will set out further reforms on asylum and border security and on tackling illegal and irregular migration, building on the new counter-terrorism powers in the Borders, Security, Asylum and Immigration Bill before the House this evening, because no one should be making these dangerous crossings on small boats. But this White Paper sets out how we restore that control to the legal migration system so it is sustainable, fair and works for the UK. First, we're overhauling the approach to labour market policy, so for the first time we properly link the immigration system to skills and training here in the UK. So that where there are skills or labour shortages in the UK, immigration should not always be the answer to which employers turn. Because that long-term failure to tackle skills shortages, bring in proper workforce planning, to get UK residents back to work, or improve pay terms and conditions here at home, is bad for our economy as well as for the immigration system because it undermines productivity and growth. So we will lift the threshold for skilled worker visas back to graduate level and above, removing up to 180 different jobs from the list, increasing salary thresholds. Access to the points-based system for lower skilled jobs will be limited to areas on a new temporary shortage list, including jobs which are critical to the industrial strategy, but access will be time limited. There must be a domestic workforce strategy in place, and employers must be acting to increase domestic recruitment. We will expect workforce strategies to be drawn up more widely in other higher skilled areas too, where there is over-reliance on recruitment from abroad. And to support that work, we will establish a new labour market evidence group, bringing together skills bodies from England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, the Department for Work and Pensions, the Industrial Strategy Council and the Migration Advisory Committee to gather and share evidence on shortage occupations in different parts of the country, and also highlight the role that skills, training, pay and conditions and other policies can play in improving domestic recruitment so that increased migration is never again the only answers to the shortages the economy faces. This new approach means we also need to act on social care. The introduction of the social care visa led not only to a huge increase in migration, but also to a shameful and deeply damaging increase in abuse and exploitation. When proper checks were finally brought in, 470 care providers had their licence to sponsor international staff suspended, and 39,000 care workers were displaced. Overseas recruitment for care jobs has since dropped, but it must not surge like that again. And it's time we address the domestic issues, including a proper fair pay agreement to show respect to people who do some of the most important jobs in the country. We are therefore ending overseas recruitment of care workers. It will continue to be possible to extend existing visas and to recruit displaced care workers and people already in the UK with working rights on other visas. Alongside the new visa controls and workforce strategies, we will also increase the immigration skills charge paid by employers who recruit from abroad by 32%. That money will be invested through the spending review in supporting skills and training here in the UK. And we will ensure that Britain continues to attract the brightest and best global talent by enhancing the visa routes for very high-skilled individuals, top scientific and design talent, and people with the right experience to support growth in key strategic industries. Madam Deputy Speaker, international students bring huge benefits to the UK, supporting our world-leading universities and bringing in top talent and investment. But we will strengthen compliance requirements and checks to prevent visa misuse. And currently, too many people on the graduate visa are not doing graduate jobs, so we will reduce the unrestricted period from 2 years to 18 months, and those who want to stay will need to get a graduate job or a skilled worker visa, so we ensure they are contributing to the economy. And just as our rules on work visas are based on the contribution we expect people to make when they come to our country, we will consult later this year on new earned settlement and citizenship rules that apply the same approach, extending the principles of the points-based system, doubling the standard qualifying period for settlement to 10 years, but with provisions to qualify more swiftly that take account of the contribution people have made. And because the ability to speak English is integral to the ability for everyone to contribute and integrate, we will introduce higher language requirements and new language requirements across a range of visa routes for both main applicants and their dependents, so family too can work, integrate and contribute. But the system for family migration has become overly complex, with policies increasingly developed around case law in court decisions rather than a coordinated framework set out by Parliament. So we will set out a new, clearer framework to be endorsed by Parliament, including clarifying how Article 8 rules should be interpreted and applied to prevent confusion or perverse conclusions. We'll review current community sponsorship schemes that support recognised refugees and continue to take action against trafficking and modern slavery. And we will shortly appoint a new Windrush Commissioner to ensure the Windrush lessons continue to be learnt and the Home Office makes sure its standards are upheld. But rules must be respected and enforced across the board, so we will also bring in stronger controls where there is evidence of visa misuse. We are rolling out e-visas and digital ID, including better use of technology to monitor when people are overstaying on their visa or to support the increase in illegal working raids. Since the election, we have increased returns and we will go further. Those who come to our country must abide by our laws. So we will develop new procedures to ensure the Home Office is informed of all foreign nationals convicted of offence, not just those who go to prison. So we can also revoke visas and remove other offenders in a wide range of crimes who are abusing our system. Madam Deputy Speaker, already we're reducing the number of visas being granted this year, and updated figures will be published before the end of the month. Already we're increasing returns with over 24,000 people in the first 9 months, the highest 9-month period for 8 years. The impact of the changes to skilled worker visas, care worker visas, settlements, students and English language is expected to reduce visas by a further around 100,000 a year. And in addition, the new workforce strategies, immigration skills charge, family and asylum reforms will further bring numbers down on top of that. And as the Prime Minister has said, where we need to go further to restore a sustainable system, we will. Madam Deputy Speaker, throughout our history, Britain has been strengthened by people coming to start new businesses, study at universities, contribute to our cultural and sporting excellence, and do some of the toughest jobs in our country. But to be successful, effective and fair, our immigration must be properly controlled and managed. This white paper sets out how we will restore control, fairness and order to the system, how we will continue to bring net migration down, and how we will turn the page on the chaos and failure of the past. I commend this statement to the House.
Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Home Secretary for advance sight of her statement, not that it was necessary given the extensive leaks and pre-briefing. Now, the Prime Minister claimed this morning that all of a sudden he wants to control immigration. I must say that came to me as something of a surprise. The Prime Minister seems to have undergone a miraculous conversion. He has apparently repudiated everything he has ever believed. Or perhaps the Prime Minister is doing what he always does, saying whatever he thinks people want to hear at any given point in time. Perhaps the Prime Minister sees his minus 36% approval ratings and this paper is his desperate response. Because, Madam Deputy Speaker, we know what the Prime Minister really thinks about immigration because he has often told us. The Prime Minister once described immigration law and border control as racist. He signed a letter opposing the deportation of dangerous foreign criminals, including murderers and rapists. He pledged he would reintroduce full free movement of people, and he sermonised enthusiastically about the benefits of migration. He even said the Yarlswood Immigration Removal Centre should be closed down. Perhaps the Home Secretary can tell us if she'll be following the Prime Minister's advice on that one. So given what the Prime Minister really thinks about immigration, it is no surprise that in 2025, this Labour government has presided over the worst start to the year in history for illegal immigrants crossing the English Channel, up 30% since the election last year, and the worst start to a year ever under this Labour government. So it's also no surprise that this plan is so weak that it barely scratches the surface. On its very first page, it seeks to create a false impression. It says visa applications, and the Home Secretary repeated this a minute ago, saying visa applications are 40% down since the election, implying that is somehow down to this government. Why are visa applications actually down by 40%? It is because of the changes made by the last government, which came into force in April 2024. And from the previous peak, net migration is already forecast to reduce by around about 500,000. And if the Home Secretary is now all of a sudden so keen on reducing migration, will she explain why she suspended the Conservative plan to increase the family visa threshold to £38,000? It was due to come into force last month. Will she tell us when that change will now be introduced? Now, the truth is, Madam Deputy Speaker, this plan is weak and it will have little impact. The Home Secretary admitted on Laura Kuenssberg's programme yesterday the measures will only reduce net migration by 50,000, just 1/10 of the impact of the previous Conservative changes. The honest truth is that we need to go much further than this paper does. Immigration needs to come down a lot more. And under new leadership, the Conservative Party is taking a new approach. Well, you can vote on this later if you're so keen. High immigration has put pressure on housing. It has put pressure on public services, on social cohesion, and on the economy. Because mass low-wage, low-skill migration actually undermines our economy's productivity and costs other taxpayers money, because low-wage migrants consume services which cost the Exchequer more than they pay in tax, particularly where there are dependents. So we need to go much further, and that is why later today the House will vote on 2 Conservative proposals as amendments to the Borders Bill, which I can see members opposite are very excited about the prospect of doing. The first of those amendments will create a binding annual cap on migration to be set and voted on democratically by this Parliament. It will allow full democratic parliamentary control over those migration numbers, deliver complete transparency and ensure immigration levels are drastically reduced. I can see the Immigration Minister talking enthusiastically from the front bench. I assume that means she'll be supporting this measure. And, Madam Deputy Speaker, secondly, we will vote on an amendment to repeal the Human Rights Act from all immigration matters. Not just tinker with Article 8, as the Home Secretary says. This will stop foreign criminals and others with no right to be here from abusing human rights laws in UK courts, including Article 3. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, I have a very simple question for the Home Secretary. Well, I'll try anyway. If she is really serious about controlling immigration, will she vote later on today for the immigration cap, and will she vote to repeal the Human Rights Act for all immigration matters?
Home Secretary.
God, Madam Deputy Speaker, I must have missed a bit of the Shadow Home Secretary's response. The bit maybe at the beginning when he apologised to the House and to the country for his party's policies that quadrupled net migration in the space of just 4 years. He tells us his concerns about the level of migration. It was his party that is responsible for that huge increase in net migration. And I must have missed the bit as well where he confessed that from the point at which he became an immigration minister in 2020, when all these policies were introduced, to the point at which the Shadow Justice Secretary finished being Immigration Minister in 2023, net migration rose from 170,000 a year to 870,000 a year. But I must have missed that confession and that apology, because that is what the Shadow Home Secretary should have done. And frankly, until he admits his failure, until he apologises for the damage, the chaos that he and his party caused, frankly, no one is going to take seriously a single word he says. And he refers to visa changes that were made before the election. I would say we supported changes that were made by the Right Honourable Member for Braintree, but he had to reverse some of the changes that the Shadow Home Secretary made when he was an immigration minister. And as for caps, the White Paper provides 4 caps on low-skilled migration on the temporary shortage list. But his targets and caps are as meaningless as all the other ones that his party introduced when they were in government. Indeed, let me quote from the time of the Conservative government's reforms that caused a lot of these problems. I especially thank the Home Secretary for removing the annual limits on work visas and on international students. I lobbied for both. That was the current leader of the opposition. So the idea that this lot have anything to offer is like people who burgled your house and then turn up the next day and offer to sell you a dog. If they are serious about making the changes, if they are serious about tackling small boats, frankly, they should vote for our counter-terrorism powers to tackle the smuggler gangs that repeatedly he and the other right-wing parties have voted against. That's not serious. This government is.
Florence Eshalomi.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I am proud to represent a diverse and vibrant constituency, Vauxhall and Camberwell Green, a place where so many people from around the world have chosen to make their home, a place where so many people contribute to our community day in, day out. Since this announcement, Madam Deputy Speaker, I've been contacted by several constituents who are currently on a work visa and looking at their path for a way for indefinite leave to remain. They are understandably worried, Home Secretary, about where this uncertainty leaves them. They're worried about their future plans. One even told me that they are worried and they're considering leaving the UK because their settled status here is under jeopardy. So can the Home Secretary please outline whether this policy applies to people who are already living and working in the UK, or will it just be to new visa applicants?
Home Secretary.
Well, thank the honourable friend for her question, and she is right to say that there are people working in all kinds of jobs across the country, contributing to our economy and to our communities who have travelled here from all over the world, and that is hugely important. We will set out further details of the earned settlement and citizenship reforms later this year, and we will consult on them. So there will be plenty of opportunity for people to comment on and consider the detail. But it is important that we have extend the sense of contributions and the points-based system to those reforms as well. We have also said that we will maintain the current 5-year route for those who have come on a dependence visa, on a family visa as well, as part of maintaining families.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Lisa Smart.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Immigration is personal to all of us, whether we're immigrants ourselves, the descendants of immigrants, or just benefit from the skills, the talents or the cultural richness that immigrants bring. For me, I'm immensely proud that our country took in my nan, aged 18, when she was fleeing the Nazis in 1939. And I am hugely grateful that the senior surgeon who did my dad's kidney transplant operation brought his skills and talents to our country, having been born elsewhere. And yes, the Conservative government made a total mess of our immigration system. Their chaotic and dishonest approach of making and breaking headline-grabbing targets shattered public trust and left the system in tatters. The line I agree with most in the government's white paper published this morning is that the immigration system must be fair and effective. What the Conservatives left behind was nowhere close to either. Change is needed, and that means rebuilding an immigration system that works for our country and our economy while treating everyone with dignity and respect. And of course, that must be coupled with a clear plan to make it easier to recruit British workers to fill these vacancies instead. And I'd welcome more details from the Home Secretary on how her government will achieve this to ensure these changes don't have unintended consequences for our economy and in particular for our health and social care systems. Will this include finally implementing the Lib Dem proposals for a higher carers minimum wage to reflect the skill level really involved in caring professions? We also need to move away from the chaotic chopping and changing of immigration rules that we saw under the Conservatives. So will the Home Secretary provide further clarity on when these changes will be brought forwards, including a clear timetable for any changes to visa rules, so that employers and workers and their families that we're talking about today can plan for their future?
Secretary.
I thank the honourable member for her points, and she is right that we need to boost the training and skills here in the UK alongside the stronger controls. On social care, we will introduce a fair pay agreement. It is really important that those vital jobs in social care, looking after our loved ones, are properly respected. And we're also on some of the timetable issues. Some of these will require primary legislation and further consultation. Others will be brought in more swiftly. For example, some of the changes to skilled worker thresholds will be brought in more swiftly. But to give her an example of the approach that we want to take, something like construction workers, for example, will be on the temporary shortage list because it is clearly crucial to growth in our economy. However, it has to be alongside respect for this workforce strategy, and that is why the Education Secretary has set out proposals to train 60,000 more construction workers here in the UK.
Sean Davies.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. This Labour government inherited disorder at the border, a broken system where criminal gangs, dodgy employers and fake colleges too often decided who came into this country. Will the Home Secretary give the courts the powers to deport, the universities and colleges the resources to train our young people, and have a system that encourages the brightest and the best to come to this country and rebuild Britain?
Secretary.
My honourable friend makes an important point. We do want to make the procedures easier for deportations of foreign criminals, for increasing returns of those who have no right to be in the UK, and that's why we will be changing the procedures that we have inherited. He is also right that we need to ensure that the best international talent is able to come swiftly to the UK, and that's why we will be setting out further reforms for the highest talent routes as well.
Sir James Cleverly.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. In her statement, the Home Secretary said that the visa changes she is putting in place will reduce net migration by 100,000 people a year. The House of Commons Library has figures that say the visa changes that I brought in would reduce net migration by 300,000 people per year. So would she now concede that her proposals are only a third as effective as mine?
Home Secretary.
I would just say to the right honourable member, nice try. He was in the cabinet that massively increased net migration, that pushed the numbers up. The fact that he then belatedly had to attempt to restrict and reverse some, but just some, of the changes that he and his colleagues had previously endorsed and put before the country. And the fact that he still never tackled this fundamental approach that the Conservatives had, which was this free market experiment, this encouraging people to recruit from abroad, never training, never supporting the training and the conditions on training here in the UK, means that fundamentally he was just desperately trying to close the door and deal with problems far too without any proper strategy on actually understanding why it was that actually you need those links with skills, links with training in the first place. That's why what we have to recognise is the important way in which migration has always supported our economy and will continue to do so. But it has to be properly controlled and managed. He didn't do that.
Chian Wura.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Tories promised net migration in the tens of thousands and left it at about 1 million. Reform's predecessor, UKIP, promised that Brexit would fix immigration. That didn't work out, did it? So the Home Secretary is absolutely right to take a reasoned, evidence-based approach to fixing the immigration system. And I welcome her emphasis on the contribution that immigrants make, and I know that our National Health Service workers in Newcastle from different backgrounds and those starting up great businesses in the country must still feel welcome as a consequence. But she's also right to critique our country's dependence on immigration for growth and the impact that has on productivity. And can she say a little bit more about how she will break that link?
Home Secretary.
Oh, my honourable friend makes a really important point, because if the response too often to any labour shortages or skills shortages is simply to turn to migration without actually addressing what are the causes of those skills or labour shortages, which might be around pay and conditions, it might be around lack of skills and training, it might be around lack of workforce planning, might be a whole series of different things. If we don't actually address those causes, then all that happens is that productivity here in the UK falls. So alongside ensuring we can get the skills that we need, ensuring that we can benefit from international talent, we have to tackle those domestic training and skills failures and make sure that we invest in those. And that is what the immigration skills charge and the increase in that immigration skills charge will help us to do.
Andrew Mitchell.
Surely, Madam Deputy Speaker, the most immediate challenge, which is enraging our constituents, is the illegal migration across the Channel, where her government has kicked away the tough deterrent measures which they inherited from the last government. So are there not three critical measures which she should be taking? The first is to work incredibly closely with all our European partners. The second is to need to look very hard at the international conventions, particularly the Geneva Convention from 1951. And thirdly, and in many ways most importantly, to work on the upstream problems at source. Increasingly, people are migrating in very large numbers from the Sahel in North Africa, fleeing from violence, starvation and extreme poverty. Does she accept that she and her European counterparts must lift their ambition and move towards a modern-day equivalent of a Marshall Plan if we are to solve this long-term and increasingly very serious issue?
Home Secretary.
Well, I do actually agree with the honourable member that we have to do more upstream to tackle some of the causes of some of the dangerous journeys that we've seen. We clearly need to act on the criminal smuggler gangs who are exploiting people and undermining our border security, and that's why the legislation tonight on counter-terrorism powers is so important. But we do also need to do much more work with the European partners. We have been working with France, for example, to get France to agree to change their rules so that they, for the first time, will start to intervene in French waters to prevent dangerous boat crossings. But I also agree with him on the importance of the Sahel and working upstream. We have established a new joint unit between the Home Office and the Foreign Office in order to do some of that prior work that he refers to.
If I'm going to get as many members as possible in this afternoon, we're going to need pithy questions and short answers, please. And a masterclass in that from the Chair of the Education Select Committee, Helen Hayes.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I represent a constituency which is enriched and sustained every day by people who have come from overseas to make their home here, especially those who came as members of the Windrush generation. It is important that they hear from this place today that they are not only valued and appreciated, they are part of us. Last week, the Office for Students published another report on the precarious situation facing our universities, and the announcement today entails a levy on universities in relation to their international students. So I want to ask the Home Secretary what engagement she has had with her counterpart in the Department for Education on the impact on the financial sustainability of universities of the measures she's announcing today.
Secretary.
My honourable friend is right that there are British citizens who have heritage from all over the world. There are people who have come here, including part of the Windrush generation, and that is why we will be shortly appointing the Windrush Commissioner to ensure that those Home Office standards are upheld and that contribution through generations is properly recognised and respected in our country. On the issue around the International Students Levy, the White Paper sets out that we will explore that levy, and that work is being led by the Education Secretary to ensure that we look at the way in which we can ensure that investment goes into supporting skills in the UK.
Christine Jardine.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Home Secretary spoke about attracting the best and the brightest to this country, and one of the areas where our universities do that is in the medical provision. During the COVID crisis and rebuilding after it, a lot of the people on the front line were immigrants. When she looks at the resettlement and the reassurance given to existing migrants? Will she take them into account and perhaps consider indefinite leave to remain for those who work through that crisis?
Home Secretary.
The honourable member makes an important point about the contribution made by those who saved lives, who cared for our loved ones through one of the most difficult periods during the pandemic. And we need to respect and recognise those contributions. There will be plenty of opportunity for everyone to contribute to the consultation on changes to the earned settlement and citizenship rules.
Tracy Gilbert.
Madam Deputy Speaker, a report into the economic impact of the Edinburgh University found that the university's education exports alone amount to £1.8 billion in the 2021-2022 academic year. Can my right honourable friend outline what engagement she will have with the University of Edinburgh to ensure that the proposals brought forward today do not have any adverse impact on the world-class universities and also on the local economic impacts?
Secretary.
Well, my honourable friend is right that the international students make a huge contribution to our country, to our economy, and universities are often very important to the local economy as well. But it is also really important that proper standards are met as well, and that where there have been cases, for example, of some institutions not properly ensuring that they were meeting the right high standards of compliance, where there was evidence that recruitment wasn't meeting high standards, where people were misusing the visas and coming for other reasons and not completing courses, we do need those standards to be met, because that is how we will underpin and maintain confidence in international students and in our world-class universities, which is hugely important to our economy.
Dr. Andrew Murison.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. In the details of the government white paper that came out over the weekend, there was very little of substance, and the Home Secretary has rather confirmed that impression today. But there are two big ticket items that my local authority and my local training providers will like some answers on. Firstly, where is the uplift in training going to be financed? When will that money arrive? Since I'm sure Trowbridge College and my constituency will be very interested to hear about that. And secondly, on the fair pay agreement, does she anticipate that statutory authorities providing statutory services will be paying for this, which presumably means council taxpayers, or will she be providing the money out of the block grant?
Home Secretary.
Well, on the point that he makes about training, already this government is going considerably further than the previous government, who allowed training to be cut, including training being cut in adult education and adult skills, at the same time as the net migration figures were substantially increasing. Already we are funding training for 60,000 more construction workers as part of our growth plans and workforce strategies. And as I set out in the white paper that I'm sure he will love the chance to be able to read and to see all of the substance within the white paper, it sets out proposals for a 32% increase in the immigration skills charge that will go into skills and training in the UK.
John McDonnell.
When legislation of this nature is being introduced, that's serious and could be contentious. It's critically important that ministers use careful language. When the Prime Minister referred to Ireland, an island of strangers, reflecting the language of Enoch Powell, does she realise how shockingly divisive that could be?
Secretary.
Well, my honourable friend is that the point that the Prime Minister has repeatedly made is that we need people to be able to integrate, to be able to be part of our communities, to be able to share with our neighbours, and that does mean being able to speak English. That is very important, and it's why we are increasing the English language standards, not just for main visa applicants, but also for partners, for spouses, for dependents, adult dependents who come as well, because too often they have been isolated in communities if they are unable to speak English. That can also lead to greater exploitation as well.
Pete Wishart.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Today's announcement, with all that appalling dehumanising language from the Prime Minister, could not be more contrary to Scotland's national interest. We actually have population and demography crisis just now. We cannot get an adequate working age population to look after our older cohort. Why is she introducing an immigration system that's contrary to everything that we need in Scotland? Why doesn't she give us the powers for us to grow our economy and public services? And why does she not give a jot about Scotland at all?
Home Secretary.
Well, let me just sort of gently just say to the honourable member, there are a series of labour market issues that need to be addressed. He will know that there were challenges in areas of Scotland's labour markets at the same time as net migration was at 900,000. So that level of net migration did not solve the issues across Scotland's labour markets. So there is a serious issue about what should happen, about skills and about training, about different workforce strategies across Scotland, and that's also why we have made clear that the skills bodies and devolved governments from Scotland, from Wales, from Northern Ireland need to be part of the labour market evidence group so that we can have that proper, broader strategy to deal with labour market challenges we face.
Dan Carden.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome the Home Secretary's emphasis on the contribution of migrants. Liverpool is a city historically made up of migrants. And I welcome the White Paper and her statement today, in particular linking migration to labour market strategy, because migration is a key economic lever of the state. And I just wonder if she would agree with me that this is not a left-right issue. This is a part of the loss of trust in democratic politics. And what we need from an asylum and immigration system is for it to have, most importantly, democratic consent.
Secretary.
Well, I think my honourable friend is right to raise the issue of trust and confidence, because I think where people feel that there is a system that isn't working or is not under control, and also where they feel that there is a huge gap between the rhetoric and the reality, that does undermine trust. I think for generations, people have valued the work of those who have come to the UK in order to work, in order to contribute, in order to study, and in order to be part of communities, but it has to be controlled and managed. And it hasn't been controlled and managed, and that has undermined confidence too.
Wendy Morton.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I think I know a gimmick when I see one, and I do fear we have seen one today. But the Home Secretary says net migration must come down, but she doesn't say what to or by when. So I'd like to ask her, what does she think the cap should be?
Home Secretary.
Yeah, I would just say to the honourable member, I'm not sure our own front bench can answer that question. Look, we have made clear that the net migration needs to substantially reduce. We have had years of targets from the previous government that all failed, that were all over the place. That undermined confidence. Those issues of trust, that massively undermined confidence. That's why we will take a different approach, and step by step we will make progress and deliver, rather than just all of the talk and the rhetoric.
Cat Smith.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Lancaster University, like all of our UK leading universities, relies on operating in a global market. That's not just for international students, but also for academic staff. Many of those staff have been in touch with me already today, and they are feeling quite hurt and upset by some of the language that has been used, particularly the language around an island of strangers. So can the Home Secretary say something to my constituents who very much contribute to the economy of Lancaster, but also are culturally enriching?
Well, we draw her attention to the words that I said as part of the statement today. It is through generations in recent years, but also going back through many generations, that people have come to the UK, been part of contributing, building our communities, and part of the country that we are today. That is who we are, and it is important. It's also important that we ensure that when people come to the UK, that they can speak English, that they can talk to each other, that they can be part of communities, because it is in areas where people haven't been able to speak English that we've often seen some of the worst exploitation as well. So that's why I think this is about recognising the importance of migration, but also ensuring that the system is fair.
Nigel Farage.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Home Secretary will be aware that 5 years ago I warned that if we didn't leave the ECHR and deport immediately those that arrived in Dover via small boats, that there would be an invasion. And sure enough, I was right. Today, a further 600 young men already today have been processed through Dover. Perhaps the odd Iranian terrorist among them. Who knows?
How do you know? How do you know?
Does the Home Secretary accept
How do you know
that their policy of smash the gangs is a complete and total failure? And if that's the case, why should we believe anything else they said?
Well, to the honourable member, no one should be making these dangerous boat crossings. They undermine our border security and they put lives at risk. Criminal gangs who are organising these dangerous boats are making a fortune and profiting from these dangerous boat crossings. And that's why we need counter-terrorism style powers to be able to go after the gangs. That is the opportunity for him and his party to vote for those counter-terrorism powers tonight so that we can strengthen our border security. Previously, he and his party voted against those counter-terrorism powers. I think we need counter-terrorism style powers to strengthen our border security in order to be able to go after those criminal gangs. Does he?
Mike Tapp.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The opposition like to talk and obsess over caps. Does the Minister agree that it might have been sensible for the previous government to place a cap on the number of Home Secretaries they had to churn through to deliver their failed open border project?
True.
Yeah, my own firm is right. I think they had 8 Home Secretaries in the space of 8 years, and 2 of them were the same person.
Esther McVeigh.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Without a third country like Rwanda, can the Home Secretary tell the House where illegal immigrants whose country of origin cannot be established because they've destroyed the documentation will be deported to? Or is it the case that they cannot be deported and so anyone who exploits that loophole can stay here with impunity?
Home Secretary.
Well, this government has increased returns since the election, 24,000 returns since the election. That includes a more than 20% increase in failed asylum cases and includes action that we are taking to deal with people who claim to have lost their papers and to ensure that we can deliver those returns. We will continue to support other policies, including working with the EU on issues around returns hubs. Let me just say to her, they had 2 years to run their Rwanda scheme. They spent £700 million and spent 4 volunteers. That was a waste of money, a failure for the taxpayer, and a failed delivery too.
Luke Akehurst.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome this statement and particularly the measures outlined to streamline deportation processes, ensuring they are fast, fair and effective. Can the Secretary of State remind the House what happened to levels of removals, including of foreign national offenders, on the party opposite's watch?
Home Secretary.
Well, the returns did drop by around a third under the previous Conservative government. I think that's very damaging. I think the rules should be respected and enforced. We also have inherited a system where the only people that they even seem to try to remove or get the information on were those who had been convicted with prison sentences. We believe that we need that information much more widely and a faster process to ensure that the rules and the laws are upheld.
Tim Farron.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Given that lengthy A&E, cancer treatment and ambulance waiting times in Cumbria are a direct result of the lack of social care workers, meaning that our hospitals are full to bursting, what assessment has she made of the damage this policy could do to patients and NHS workers in my communities, where the most regular experience we have with migrants is they cared for us and our loved ones?
Secretary.
Well, we need to support social care and recognise the importance of that job, and that means tackling the long-term recruitment issues here in the UK and not simply always thinking that we can ignore those problems and turn to migration instead. He will know that there have been huge problems, including abuse and exploitation, as a result of that route, and 39,000 people who came here on a care worker visa, often in good faith, ended up being displaced when finally checks were introduced. That's why regional hubs have been introduced to ensure that employers can still recruit from those displaced workers rather than continuing to recruit from abroad.
Nadia Whittam.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Migrants are being scapegoated for problems that they didn't cause, and to be truthful, these arbitrary measures won't fix those problems, and they will harm migrants, people who need social care, our economy, anyone who fears racial abuse, which the rhetoric surrounding this emboldens. Why are we trying to ape reform when that will do nothing to improve our constituents' lives and just stoke more division?
True. Well, what I would say to my honourable friend is that in the space of just 4 years, we saw a huge increase in overseas recruitment at exactly the same time as training in the UK fell. Now, I think that is a real problem in the UK labour market, to have such steep increases at the same time as such deep problems in terms of training in the UK. And that's why I think it's so important to ensure that we link the immigration system with training and skills for the first time. That hasn't happened before. I think it's been the wrong approach to the labour market. It's right that we bring in those reforms. Of course, she's right to say we also recognise the huge contribution that people make as part of our country, and that we also do so in a way that respects people for the contribution they make, and that is embedded in our system. But we have to change this broken labour market approach.
Paula Denyer.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Prime Minister's Island of Strangers speech sounded like something straight out of the Reform Trump playbook. Rather than alienating and devaluing migrants, recognising the need to increase the number of Brits who want to work in our health and care sectors, wouldn't the Minister prefer to support the Unison campaign for a certificate of common sponsorship to protect the working rights of migrant workers who are working in unacceptable situations of exploitation, bordering on slavery and at threat of deportation? As a Labour member, would she not prefer to support that Unison campaign?
Home Secretary.
Well, one of the issues that we've highlighted in the White Paper is the importance of tackling exploitation, which is deeply damaging for those who have come to the UK in good faith, and also damaging for other employers as well. So one of the points we want to explore is making it easier for people to not be held to a single employer where there are problems with the sponsorship arrangements, and to make that system more effective so that it can tackle exploitation.
Sally Jameson.
Madam Deputy Speaker, and I welcome today's White Paper, which actually brings some substantive reforms to our immigration system after over a decade of expensive rhetoric. But can the Home Secretary set out what further reforms that the government is considering for our asylum and appeal system, as well to the ludicrous hotel situation that we were left with by the last government?
Home Secretary.
Well, my honourable friend is right. We need to end asylum hotels, and that means we have to clear the shocking backlog that were left with by the previous government, who just stopped taking asylum decisions in the last few months in the run-up to the election. One of the measures we're also introducing, though, is new statutory timetables for appeals, because it's currently the appeal system that is holding up a lot of the issues in terms of the backlog. We need that through. That is part of the border security bill that we'll be able to vote on tonight, and that's why I hope all parties in this House will support it.
Mark Pritchard.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I welcome the Home Secretary's statement today? And it's in the national interest that the government get this right, and I hope that that will happen. I'm not convinced yet, to be honest, and we haven't seen much of the detail. But can I also support the Honourable Member for Clacton and his concerns around national security? I think that is something that should be taken more seriously. But this year, 10,500 people have crossed the English Channel, legal migrants. That is a record number for this period of time in any year previous. And I just saw nothing today in the Prime Minister's early leaked statement, or indeed the Home Secretary's statement, on a deterrent. Without a deterrent, you can have all the counter-terrorism commands, all the new laws, all the great statements. Nothing is going to change.
Secretary.
Well, this evening, Madam Deputy Speaker, we will be able to vote for a border security bill which includes counter-terrorism powers in order to tackle criminal smuggler gangs. And the Prime Minister said before Christmas, when we hosted the Interpol conference, that border security is a national security issue and needs to be taken seriously as such. That is why we need those counter-terrorism powers. That's why we need our police, National Crime Agency, Border Force and border authorities to be able to intervene much earlier, to be able to take action against this dangerous trade in people that does undermine our national security as well as our border security. So I hope he'll vote for the bill tonight.
Chris Murray.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The public have been waiting for 15 years to hear a government set out a serious strategy to actually get a grip on the legal migration system, so that it works for public confidence, so that it works for the economy, and so that it works for migrants themselves. So on that point, can I welcome the measures the Home Secretary has announced in relation to the health and social care visas? Because this has been really disruptive for the labour market, but it has also led to instances of extreme exploitation and modern slavery. And will she commit to these new measures being fully modern slavery proofed in the White Paper?
Home Secretary.
I welcome my honourable friend's points. There have been really just shameful examples of exploitation that probably all of us have come across in our constituencies around the social care visa and the way that it was introduced, but also here people who have come to work incredibly hard in our care homes, and that's why it's so important that we tackle that exploitation, and that's why we need to ensure that those standards are met, that we have a fair pay agreement, and certainly that we maintain standards around tackling trafficking and modern slavery too.
Ben Lake.
The Home Secretary will be aware of the funding crisis that afflicts so many of the UK's universities, and so much so that last year, when the Migration Advisory Committee reviewed the graduate visa route, it concluded that it should be retained, stating that under the current higher education funding model, closure or additional restrictions to the route could put many universities at financial risk. What is the Home Secretary's assessment of the impact of these changes today on the financial sustainability of our universities?
Secretary. Well, I would say to the honourable member, where the universities are already meeting high standards of compliance, that is really welcome, and the majority of universities already do. Those that currently don't are going to need to increase their compliance standards to make sure that we have a proper and robust system. And in terms of the graduate visa as well, people will be able to stay on for the unrestricted 18 months. If they want to stay on for longer, they need to be contributing in graduate jobs, because too often people have stayed and not been part of graduate jobs even though they've got a graduate degree, so they should be getting graduate jobs, including as part of a skilled visa as well.
Steve Yem.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I wonder if the Secretary of State would agree with me that the best way to address soaring migration for work is to properly train and upskill our domestic workers in constituencies like mine in Mansfield. And I wonder how the measures introduced today will contribute to that aim.
Home Secretary.
My honourable friend is exactly right, and in Mansfield and right across the country we need the training, we need the skills. The proposals for the immigration skills charge will mean that employers who are recruiting from abroad will need to contribute more towards training and skills in the UK. And where there are areas where there are persistent shortages, and there will be some of those which are still crucial to the economy, alongside being part of the temporary shortage list, those sectors will need to have proper workforce strategies in place for the first time to set out what action they are taking to improve and increase domestic recruitment and training so that it benefits UK residents who need to be part of our labour force.
Monica Harding.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. A care provider in my constituency of Esher and Walton has already got in touch to say a third of his workers are from overseas and delivering about 60% of his work. So turning it around, he will be unable to care for 80 of 120 of his clients. He's been hit with horrendous national insurance contributions. Invested thousands of pounds in the model. So in the absence of any adult social care plan, the government is now effectively capping the amount of workers. So how do we plug the gap very quickly? And will the care providers be properly supported with funding to allow these changes to happen?
So in the care provider in the Honourable Member's constituency, they will be able to extend those care visas. They will also be able to recruit from the number of displaced care workers, which was 39,000 care workers were displaced when the proper new checks and standards were brought in, and they'll be able to recruit from the local community as well, including alongside a proper fair pay agreement in place. So we need to make sure that there is a proper strategy to value social care and to deal with some of the causes of recruitment historically, rather than always having the kind of impact with the social care visa recruiting from abroad at such a scale that it led to significant exploitation.
Olivia Blake.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Does the Secretary of State agree that, far from being strangers, migrants are our neighbours, our friends and family and integral parts and members of our communities, and that moves to cast them as strangers are both divisive and hostile and risk legitimising the same far-right violence that we saw in last year's summer riots? Have we learnt nothing?
Home Secretary.
Well, as I set out in my statement, Madam Deputy Speaker, the people who have come here from abroad through very many generations, contributing to our economy and to our country, being part of our community and making our country what it is. That is who we are as a country because of that history, and it will continue to be important for our future. We do want people to be able to integrate, to be able to share with neighbours, and that is why some of the provisions around ensuring that we support integration and support English language are so important as well.
Ben Objective.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. How does the Immigration White Paper address the significant number of pull factors currently advertised online? The government's own website, Asylum Support, What You'll Get, is there for any aspirational English-speaking asylum seeker to see just why it's worth running the risk of crossing the channel. You'll be given somewhere to live if you need it. This could be in a flat, house, hostel or bed and breakfast. You usually get £49.18 for each person in your household. This will help you pay for things like food, clothing and toiletries. Your allowance will be loaded onto a debit card each week.
Please, can we get to a question?
So what is the government doing to address the online advertising of this incredibly generous package?
Home Secretary.
So we have inherited an asylum system in complete chaos. It's why we are reducing the backlog. It's why we've also been taking action to tackle some of the areas where there has been visa misuse, including some of the issues around, we've had issues around a series of countries where people have increased the applications for asylum even though they have come here lawfully on visas as well. We will continue to tackle those, and we will introduce new reforms alongside this white paper on legal migration.
Becky Gittins.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Last June, the now Home Secretary visited Betty Birkin's cafe in my constituency to discuss the very matter of overseas recruitment massively increasing. Meanwhile, the investment in our domestic workforce was drastically going down, contributing to the quadrupling of the net migration figures between the periods of 2019 and 2023. Does the Secretary of State agree with me that the best way to address the soaring migration specifically from work is to properly train and upskill our domestic workforce, measures already present in our groundbreaking Employment Rights Bill? And how will measures introduced today contribute to that work and the overall aim?
My honourable friend's right, we do need proper training and skills to be in a situation where engineering visas could go up at the same time as engineering apprenticeships go down. That is a system that doesn't make any sense to anyone, and that's why we need to make sure that not only have we got the training and skills, but actually we link those with the shortages and we link them with the immigration system as well.
Sammy Wilson.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the House is right to be sceptical about a policy which has been announced
on a toxic issue after the government has suffered a significant electoral defeat where the main issue was immigration. But can the Minister tell us how deliverable are many of these policies? The hundreds of thousands who are in undergraduate level employment at present, what's going to happen to them? For the time period between recruiting and training people and getting them into jobs, how's that gap going to be filled? And since the courts won't even allow the deportation of people who have served long prison sentences, how does she expect the courts to comply with her wish to deport people who have served no prison sentence?
Secretary. Well, to say to the Honourable Member, we're implementing the policies and commitments made in our manifesto to restore control and order to the immigration system, to make sure that we bring net migration down and we have a system that is fair. As part of the changes that we are introducing as a result of this white paper, we have identified up to 180 occupations, lower skilled occupations that should not be recruiting from abroad, that should not be part of the temporary shortage list either, so that we make sure that we reduce the lower skilled migration that increased so substantially over the last 4 years, and so that we make sure we support skills and training and tackle those labour market challenges.
Joe White.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. With net migration figures of 1.7 million over the last 2 years of the previous government, when I speak to people in Bassetlaw, they tell me that they are fed up with the pressures that uncontrolled immigration has put on our local infrastructure. The Prime Minister has recognised this today with a clear commitment to reduce net migration and take back control of our borders. Can I congratulate my right honourable friend on this landmark cross-government white paper, which will fix the mess left by the party opposite? Does she agree with me that we need to stop the reliance on imported workers from abroad and focus on properly training British people instead?
Home Secretary.
Well, Honourable Friend's right that this is a cross-government approach, and it links to the work that the DWP Secretary, the Welfare Pension Secretary, is doing on helping people back into work, that the Education Secretary is doing on boosting training, that the Business Secretary is doing on building up industrial strategies so that we can plan in terms of the workforce of the future. This is a cross-government approach. That's how we make sure that we both make sure we've got control in our migration system and also boost the productivity of the economy.
Lincoln Job.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. What was it about the local election results that first attracted the Home Secretary to the idea of rushing out an immigration white paper?
Secretary.
I have to say to the Honourable Member, even I could not draw up a white paper in the space of 2 weeks. This is a white paper that was announced by the Prime Minister before Christmas, when we saw the scale of the huge increase in net migration that his party had presided over, and it's also implementing the policies that we set out in our manifesto to properly link the immigration system with training and skills in the UK.
Rachel Maskell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm proud to represent this country's only human rights city, where everybody is welcome and every life is of equal worth. Our economy depends very much on our universities and our universities on international students. In fact, employers will come to our country because of the diversity of our students. So will she ensure that she properly consults the higher education sector? The second biggest export from my constituency is higher education, to ensure that we don't harm my local economy, but also the opportunities of international students and home students too.
Secretary. Well, I do strongly value the contribution from international students to our economy, and she is completely right to say how important international students are. But that's also why we need to make sure that standards are upheld in terms of universities, ensuring that systems aren't misused so that we can continue to support international students. And also, I think it will benefit our economy if those students who stay on afterwards are also doing graduate jobs.
Max Wilkinson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. One of the things I've appreciated about this government's approach is the moderate tone of language they've taken on really divisive cultural issues. I'm afraid today I've been disappointed by what I heard from the Prime Minister when he used the phrase island of strangers. We all remember the deleterious effect on public debate that happened after the Citizen of Nowhere speech, and I'm concerned that we're going in the same direction. Can the Home Secretary offer me any reassurance?
Home Secretary.
Well, the approach that we have set out, in our manifesto, the approach that we have set out in this white paper, is about how we properly control and manage the migration system so that it benefits the UK, so that it supports community cohesion, for example, by supporting integration, by ensuring that people can speak English and can, as a result of that, also challenge exploitation as well. So that's why I think the approach that we're taking is about embedding that fairness, about embedding community cohesion at the heart of our immigration system. Too often, those issues around integration and community cohesion haven't been part of the immigration system. This white paper makes sure that they are.
Jacob Collier.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I recently visited a care company that expressed serious concerns about bogus organisations registering as care providers in order to sponsor individuals through the health and care visa. This not only undercuts legitimate care providers who pay and treat their staff properly, but also raises significant concerns about the potential exploitation of workers entering the UK. Can I ask the Home Secretary what steps she plans to take to clamp down on these fraudulent practices and support reputable British care companies?
Home Secretary.
My honourable friend is right that the kind of exploitation that we've seen has been deeply damaging for people who've come to this country in good faith, and he will have spoken to people, I have spoken to people who travelled from far overseas only to discover that there was no job for them when they arrived. They had sometimes been charged money as well in order to do so, and who were being a huge risk of exploitation as well. So as well as taking action around with the Fair Work Agency and other areas to tackle exploitation more widely, that is also why we think it is right to end the overseas recruitment for care worker visas and to support the care sector through the Fair Pay Agreement and through improving the support here in the UK.
I intend to continue this statement until 6:15, so appreciate that many members might be disappointed. Lewis Cocking.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. My constituency of Broxbourne has a hotel that is used to house illegal asylum seekers. This has placed huge pressure on local GP surgeries and schools, which are already overstretched, and me and my constituents have had enough. Will the Secretary of State meet with me to discuss this issue in Broxbourne, and can she tell me when the hotel housing illegal asylum seekers in my constituency of Broxbourne will close?
Secretary.
Well, the honourable member will know that the previous government introduced asylum hotels because it lost control of the asylum system. This government is clear we need to end asylum hotels. To do that, we need to clear the backlog. That also includes making reforms to the appeals system, again, a broken system that we inherited on asylum appeals, and we are now taking reforms through tonight as part of the Border Security Bill. I hope he will vote for those reforms so that we can end asylum hotels.
Tulip Siddiq.
My constituency of Hampstead and Highgate has a proud history of welcoming refugees, whether it's migrants from Ireland back in the day or people fleeing political persecution in Nazi Germany. More recently, they opened their doors to refugees from Afghanistan and Ukraine. I welcome the government's measures to enable refugees to access skilled workers' visas, but could I ask the Home Secretary, what are her plans for refugees whose work visas will expire but they cannot return to their countries of origin? Will they be eligible for settled status, and how will the government guarantee their safety in the UK?
Home Secretary.
Honourable friend is right, we have supported particularly those here from Ukraine, from Hong Kong, from Afghanistan who have fled persecution or conflict, or in Afghanistan's case worked with our armed forces. That will continue to be important. We want also refugees to be able to apply for the skilled worker visa in a way that other people are able to do so, and also to ensure that she will rightly say there are people who will be in this country when the circumstances in their home country change. And in those circumstances, of course, there need to be provision either through the asylum system or through them being able to reapply for their visas as well.
Stephen Gethings.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker, the Home Secretary will be aware that our higher education sector is world leading because it brings in the brightest and the best from around the world, our researchers, scientists, medical staff. Now, she will also be aware that universities are struggling because of Home Office rules, not least Dundee University, which has suffered millions of pounds worth of losses. Will she take my invitation to please come to Dundee so she can see the direct consequences that her department's policies are having on that university?
Madam Secretary.
Well, international students have brought huge benefits. They also they contribute bringing investment as well as the skills and talent, and universities are important parts of local economies right across the country. It is, though, important that all universities meet the proper standards of visa compliance. Many do, the vast majority do. There are some which have not met those compliance standards, and we urge them to do so, and we will work with them, including setting out action plans with them in order to do so. We do also want students who stay in this country after they finish their course to also get graduate jobs so that they can properly contribute to our economy.
Andrew Pearce.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Peterborough is a generous and a warm place, and our city and public services have been made richer because of the peoples who have come and made their home in communities alongside myself and others. But for too many people, too many working class families, they often feel the system is rigged against them when it comes to skills and wages. So can I ask my right honourable friend to tell us a bit more about the work that the White Paper will do with Skills England, the Department for Education and others to ensure we boost apprenticeships? And can I just ask her if she will keep high on her mind and reiterate to this House the desire to tackle illegal immigration as well, and to ensure that hotels like the Dragonfly in my hotel are stood down as soon as possible?
Madam Secretary.
We do need to increase apprenticeships and training. That's why we're supporting 60,000 more construction workers to be able to go through training to be able to support our economy alongside, as he rightly says, plans to make sure that we can end asylum hotels.
Nick Timothy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. In answer to the Honourable Member for Vauxhall and Camberwell Green, the Home Secretary refused to say whether her proposals to reform indefinite leave to remain, briefed to the media as a tough new crackdown, will apply to immigrants who are already here. If it doesn't apply to people already here, it makes a mockery of the very idea of reform. So will she answer very clearly, will the new rules apply to existing immigrants or just those coming in future?
Madam Secretary.
We want the settlement rules to be amended as swiftly as possible and to be able to apply widely, but we will consult on the detail, and it is right that we do so. And I would also say to him, this is one of just many things that we are needing to do to clear up the chaos that his party left.
John Pearce.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. After 14 years of broken promises, I'd warmly welcome the Home Secretary's statement to bring down net migration. With 1 in 8 young people not in education, employment or training, will the Secretary of State set out to the families and young people in my constituency of High Peak what this White Paper will do for them?
Madam Secretary.
One of the most important aspects of the White Paper will be the increase in the immigration skills charge, which will mean that where employers are recruiting from abroad, where there are shortage occupations, they are contributing more that can help support skills and training here in the UK, and that includes supporting our young people to be able to get the apprentices and jobs they need.
Alison Bennett.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The announcements today will deepen social care workforce shortages and risk harm to those who receive care. Has the government considered the impacts upon the sick, the frail, the elderly who rely upon care workers to provide vital support? And will the government publish an impact assessment setting out the effect of their reforms and what it will do for the quality and availability of care and on the work of the KC Commission?
Madam Secretary.
Well, as I pointed out in my statement, the number of care workers recruited from abroad has fallen since the initial big increase. The important thing is to prevent that increase taking place again, because we have seen significant exploitation as a result. As a result of introducing the higher standards, 39 39,000 care workers were displaced. They came here to do jobs that either didn't exist or didn't meet the right standards. We would urge care providers to recruit from the pool of people who are already here.
Scott Arthur.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Home Secretary for her statement and the steps she's taken to bring order to the chaotic immigration system we inherited. But I do want to ask a question within the context of a register of interests. Universities in Edinburgh are on their knees because of changes the Tory government made to immigration and also because of SNP cuts to the sector. Staff are keen to contribute to the economic growth in the UK, but they're concerned that what's in the white paper might make that harder. So can she commit to working cross-government to ensuring universities come out of this stronger so they can contribute to economic growth?
Secretary.
What the honourable member also may be aware is that the increase in the student visas, the biggest increases in student visas were often on the universities that were lower ranking in the university league tables, and where we also had people then afterwards not doing graduate jobs. So we hugely support international students. He's right to refer to Edinburgh University, to other universities across the country, and we want to work with universities to ensure that high standards of compliance are being met, and also that where international students stay in the UK, they are also doing graduate jobs as well.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Could the Home Secretary explain why, in the introduction of this white paper, the language of Enoch Powell was used by the Prime Minister? There's been no speaking up about the enormous value of migration to this country that's kept our NHS running, our education service running, and so much more, and that there are already 130,000 vacancies in the care sector. Does anything in her white paper do anything to improve community relations or deal with the now labour shortage within the NHS and the care service, or is it all about trying to please these people who unfortunately sit in front of me?
Well, what I would just say to the honourable member is, I think at the very beginning of my statement to this House, I talked about the importance of those who come to work in our NHS, those who come to serve in our armed forces, those who come to work in constituencies like mine, in coal mining jobs, those who come sometimes to do some of the most difficult jobs of all. But it's because migration is important that it needs to be controlled and managed. And we need to tackle the underlying problems in the labour market. So for net migration to quadruple in the space of 4 years, at the same time as domestic training is being cut, at the same time as we haven't had the support for the skills and training in the UK, I think shows a system that just is not working. We have to tackle those training and skills shortages alongside bringing net migration down.
Rachel Taylor.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. My constituents are sick and tired of broken promises on immigration. 5 Conservative Prime Ministers promised to cut arrivals while deliberately letting numbers reach record highs. Can the Secretary of State confirm to the people of North Warwickshire and Bedworth that the broken promises are over, and when this government says we will cut immigration levels and invest in skills and training and good jobs for my constituents, that is exactly what we will do?
Secretary.
Well, what I would say to my honourable friend, she makes a really important point, is that we're setting out practical plans on the skilled worker visa, practical plans on construction training jobs, practical plans on the immigration skills charge in order to be able to invest in that training. It's through those practical common sense plans, step by step, that we will have an impact on restoring order to the immigration system and also bringing net migration down.
Greg Smith.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The White Paper talks in vague terms about potential changes that build upon and learn from the Displaced Talent Programme. So can the Home Secretary be really clear with the House where she sees those changes going, and more importantly, what safeguards she will put in place to ensure that any such changes don't act as some sort of massive magnet for those that wish to illegally enter our country?
Secretary.
Well, I think actually the opposite is true from what he said. We've talked about having capped and limited schemes, and also ensuring that at the moment it's possible for people in other parts of the world to be able to apply for a skilled worker visa if they have the talent. For example, if they are an engineer, if they are a scientist. But often refugees, recognised refugees, are not able to apply for visas, skilled worker visas, as scientists or doctors and so on, even though they have the skills and talent to be able to do so. And that is why we should just ensure that we can do our bit to help refugees who also should be able to come to be part of a skilled worker visa where they have the skills to do so.